Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Jennifer Tanner. We are here today with a very special guest. We are so lucky to have her. If you guys are runners and you're thinking, like, I know everybody goes through this. In the middle of the run, like you start off strong, you're like, yes, I can do this. In the middle of the run, you're like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? And you go through this total mental battle of, why am I here? This is a bad idea. This is starting to hurt. I don't belong here. We all have a bit of that like imposter syndrome. I hear every single runner that comes into my office tells me that they are not a runner. I don't believe that. You are out there running. You are absolutely a runner. So we're going to talk a little bit about that mindset battle. So if you think of any pro athlete, they are definitely doing that visualization from beginning to end. Our mindset can make it or break it for us. So today we have a psychotherapist and a mindset and relationship expert with us to help us overcome some of those obstacles that are keeping us from finishing strong. So welcome, Dr. Shyamala Kiru.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jen. I'm so excited to be here and be with your community and really get into some of that nitty gritty that can really hold us back and get us stuck and these limiting beliefs and these mindset constructs that can get in the way of us really executing at our fullest potential. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with your community.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you here as well. Now, tell me a little bit about the importance. You are a mindset, a high performance relationship expert. Tell me about this high performance business. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've been in practice for over 15 years, and I've really began to notice that there's a pattern and there's a trend in terms of what allows us to execute, as I said, at our fullest potential. And that can be whether it's in sports, athletics, in our own fitness journey, and it can also be in our careers and in our relationships. And so for me, there's a definite framework that allows us to really develop and build those emotional intelligence skills. And believe it or not, emotional intelligence is a part of what allows us to perform physically as well. And Jen, you probably know some of this from your community and some of the work that you do, but really often what gets people stuck is not their physical ability, right? Mm-hmm. It's their mental capacity and really what's happening in the background, really what's happening from a mindset perspective. That's ultimately what can get us stuck. And it's also ultimately what can propel us forward. So I think for me, that my passion has been really, how do we get people to dial in their mindset so that they are able to, crush those goals, right? Whether that's physical or mental or relational or career, like how do we get to that place?
Yeah, I love how you kind of put both ends on it, right? That is the mindset is the thing that can be holding us back, but it's also the thing that can be propelling us forward. And I think my story is a perfect example of kind of propelling you forward. And that when I ran my first marathon, I could barely run to the library and back, which was probably about a kilometer each way. And I'm telling my friends, my family, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to run a marathon. And they're like, well, maybe you should start with a 5K. I'm like, no, I can do this. I know I can do this. And I just had that mindset the entire time that if I put the hours in, I do the training, I know 100% I can do this. And absolutely, within like the however many weeks we were training, I did it. And it was a perfect example of that. You put your mind to it, it absolutely can shift. Now, maintaining that mindset is another issue as well. Can you touch a little bit, like I hear this all the time, we mentioned it at the beginning, that imposter syndrome that a lot of runners have, like I don't feel like I belong, I don't feel like I'm good enough, I don't feel like I'm fast enough. Like why might people be questioning themselves when they're doing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's fascinating to me, regardless of the professional that I'm speaking with and that I'm connecting with when I do these interviews or these podcasts or things like this. That we all have this common experience of working with people that are getting stuck when it comes to imposter syndrome, and it's so common, and it really is all up here, right? Imposter syndrome is right here. It's all about the way that we think about about ourselves, number one, but it's also the way that we think about and construct that thing that we want to do, right? And so in your case, Jen, and with your audience, that thing that they're wanting to do and to do well is run, right? And this whole idea, identity as a runner. And so we can be really black and white in our thinking. We can be very all or nothing in our thinking. I'm either a runner or I'm not. And we can develop this really fixed and rigid mindset around what it actually means to be a runner. And so what I want to kind of touch on with your audience today is what is imposter syndrome? And I wanted to make sure I got the definition correct for you guys. Imposter syndrome essentially is a collection of feelings of inadequacy. So imposter syndrome is rooted in feelings of inadequacy, and it's a collection of those feelings. And we can have those feelings despite success. Right? And so that's what essentially creates the tension of imposter syndrome. It's having a collection of feelings of inadequacy, Jen, despite the successes that we might have, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's something that so many of us struggle with, and especially as we move through different stages of success, right? So we could have it as a 5K runner, we could have it as a 10K runner, and we could have it as an avid marathon runner. And it's this idea that despite the fact that I've experienced these day-to-day, moment-to-moment, perhaps month-over-month successes in my sport and in my passion, I can still feel like an imposter. I can still feel like I am not good enough. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the definition, that's the framework that really identifies imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for putting that definition out there. Now, so just say I'm doing that, most runners, they'll do a long run on the weekend, and that's when the mind really starts to to eat away at us. So just say we're doing that and we start feeling like some of that, exactly what you said, those sensations of inadequacy. What can we do about it?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And I want to offer a solution for your audience that's really rooted in research. So what we know about activities such as running, swimming, walking. And I use these as examples because they are rhythmic activities. There's a rhythm to running. There's a rhythm to walking. There's a rhythm to cycling and to swimming. That's a little bit different from other modalities of exercise. And so one of the things that we know from a mind-body perspective is that when we are engaged in rhythmic cardiovascular activities such as running, it has a tremendous positive impact on our moods and on our mindset. And in fact, what research would tell us is that rhythmic cardiovascular activities can be as helpful in treating anxiety, depression, stress, these feelings of inadequacy as medication can be. So it can be as helpful, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm not a running expert, I actually prescribe exercise to many of my clients, many of my patients. I will share with them the mental health benefits of using rhythmic exercise. But the key, Jen, is to make sure that we are exercising mindfully, right? Okay. So I want to dig a little bit deeper in terms of how we can actually use exercise to manage our moods, because I think it's such a powerful tool. And so the key is that when you are, and so for your audience, when you are running, what you want to do is rather than connect to those negative racing thoughts that can come up, mm-hmm. and rather than allow your mind to sort of travel down that road, because what happens is that takes you away from your body. Mm-hmm. And it takes you away from your breath, and it takes you away from the incredible mental health benefits that running has. So what you want to do instead is remain connected to your breath, remain connected to your body, and you want to be able to replace those limiting negative thoughts with a healthy, empowering thought. So many of the clients that I work with will choose and will define a thought that's really empowering for them. And they will connect that thought and repeat it along with their breath and along with their footsteps while they are running. right? So that thought could be something like, I am strong. I can do this, right? I'm taking control of my fitness, or I'm taking control of my life, right? We all need to find that new, healthy, high performance belief that will really allow us to execute fully. And that's really the secret of high performance athletes.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love it. I love the I am strong one. That one really resonated with me, and just kind of you can feel it, as each foot, like left, right, is kind of going into that movement. Now, Dr. Kiru has generously included a mindset booklet for us at the end, where we can do a mindset audit. So when we're finished this, you'll be guided over to link into that. So you can dig a little bit deeper about what is your mindset and what might be holding you back. And I love how you touched on, how that rhythmic movement can be beneficial for anxiety and depression. It is one of the things that I actually prescribe with my regular patients as well, that a lot of them do feel better when they're out there moving. However, there is this a percentage of people that I do see that they're actually running away from something. So I love like that you have that relationship expert background, because that tends to be one of the things that they're kind of running away from, and they're using particularly the long distances um, to get out, right? So they have an excuse to be out and about for hours and hours. Do you have any kind of feedback on that connection?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a great, I guess, insight really that you've gathered, Jen, in your work with people. And I think you're right. I think with any of our passions, right? Any of the things that we're really, that we can use work that way, we can use exercise that way. There's so many things that we can use to self-soothe from difficult and uncomfortable emotions, from difficult relationships. We can use all sorts of activities to avoid having difficult conversations. And I get, running is really just one example. And I think really it points to a bigger issue, right? So we don't want to take running out, because running is amazing, right? It's so healthy. And even those longer runs, I think for your mindset, are incredibly healthy. What we want to be conscious of and aware of is, what is the deeper issue that I really need to address? And one of the things that we know about uncomfortable feelings of anxiety, of fear, of disconnection, is the more we run away from or move away from addressing those issues, the bigger those fears and those anxieties become, right? So avoidance is probably one of the most common tactics for dealing with discomfort, but it's also one of the least effective tactics for dealing with discomfort, right? So I think it's about really being honest with yourself, right? And really identifying, what is it that I'm running away from? What is it that I actually need to face? What is it that I actually need to lean into? And what are some of those difficult conversations that I need to have? And you alluded to the mindset audit. That's absolutely available to your audience. I also want to make my communication audit available, because often what it comes back to is communication style, right? If we don't have a framework for having these difficult conversations with the people that we love, it becomes really scary. And so we also know that avoidance of difficult conversations is one of those really popular strategies that doesn't work. So being able to identify that tendency to move away from conflict is critical. And so this whole idea of running away from could indicate either a passive communication style or a passive aggressive communication style, right? Because we're essentially moving away from that difficult conversation, but not being direct about it, right? We're not saying, I can't have this conversation with you, or I can't address this issue right now. We might be using running as a way to avoid that conflict.
Okay. Now, just say somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, I think that might be me. I think there's this rooted cause, that that's pushing me out the door a little bit more. I think I might have to have one of those deeper conversations. Any tips on how somebody might approach their partner, or, you know, whether it's at work or it's their relationship partner, approach that person to have that difficult conversation with? Any tips on how to get started with that part of it?
Yes, great question. So we have a Communicate with Confidence course that'll be coming out probably in the spring. And there are a couple of formulas that we teach in that course that really allow people to, number one, build their confidence around having these sorts of conversations. But then secondly, having sort of a framework for how do we actually do this? Because the truth is, most of us are not taught how to communicate assertively and how to communicate with confidence well. So I'd love to share a couple of those ideas, and we teach in one of the courses that we offer is the Real Talk formula. So I'd love to share that framework with you because it's a really easy way to remember how to have these sorts of conversations. So Real Talk is actually an acronym. So the very first step in the Real Talk formula is to regulate. Okay. And what I mean by that is we have to self-regulate. So in order to have these sorts of conversations and for them to be effective and for us to be able to communicate with confidence, the very first step is our own emotional regulation. So we have to make sure that we're not approaching these conversations from a place where we are frustrated or we are angry or we are upset or we are anxious. So the very first step is to be able to identify and regulate your emotions. And then once you've done that, the next step is E, which is express. So once you're sufficiently self-regulated, then you are ready to express your wants, your needs, your desires, your boundaries to another person. And that's where you get really concrete and you begin to express what it is that you need. Perhaps it's something that has to change. Perhaps it's a boundary that you want to renegotiate with that person. So then you go in and you express that.
Okay.
The A and the L of Real Talk sort of go hand in hand. And I would say that they are the most challenging component of the Real Talk formula because it's about accepting the outcome and being able to let go. Okay. So one of the key elements of communicating with confidence is not being tied to the outcome. Okay. So what happens, Jen, when we are tied to a particular outcome is it totally dysregulates us. Right? So if I'm having a conversation with you, for example, and I'm asking for something, if I go into that conversation feeling like I need to control the outcome or I need things to go a certain way, I'm going to enter that conversation dysregulated. I'm going to enter it with this high need for control, and that's going to make it very difficult for me to communicate with you calmly and confidently. And it's not going to leave space for you to then be responsive in that conversation. It will not allow us to foster intimacy in our relationship, right?
Okay.
So those last two steps really are hand in hand. It's about accepting the outcome because we can't control outcomes and being able to let go of that, right? And so that's what allows us to sort of move through these difficult conversations and be able to practice them, because it takes a lot of practice to be able to have these types of conversations in a way that actually fosters intimacy in relationships.
Okay. Beautiful. I love that now we have a step-by-step process. And even that, I feel like the Real can even apply to your race day as well. Like, especially accepting the outcome and letting go. I have so many people that are beating themselves up over minutes or even seconds difference in their race results. And they forget the whole big picture that you just succeeded, you just completed this. And for the majority of us, we're really competing against ourselves when it comes down to that actual race day. There isn't a whole lot of people in that race that are actually competing to win the race. But I love now, like, we have a framework for how we can approach those difficult conversations, because I feel like you said, avoidance is number one.
Yes, it sure is.
And so now there's a sense of awareness that maybe we can feel that, oh my gosh, I am avoiding this. Maybe I really do need to learn how to communicate with confidence. And I absolutely love that you have offered a course for that. So those courses, the Real Talk Formula course is up and coming. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so we have 3 courses, and they really represent the 3 pillars of care that we use when we are coaching people in terms of having amazing relationships. And really what we use is a framework built around emotional intelligence. And so the first course is mindset mastery, and that's where we look at these limiting beliefs, things like imposter syndrome. We look at cognitive distortions, and we look at thinking traps. The second course is where Real Talk Formula can be found. It's called Communicate with Confidence. And it's really our second pillar of success. We teach people how to really dial in their communication skills so they're able to navigate their relationships well. And then our final course is our final pillar of care, which is authentic connection. And that's where we look at, how do we navigate our relationships well? How do we balance togetherness and separateness, right? How do we build strong, secure attachment rather than being anxiously attached, which is so common for so many of the people that we work with. And so that's sort of the bigger framework that we use to really build those emotional intelligence skills. And we're going to Mindset Mastery has already been launched. It's sold out right now, but we're going to be launching the entire framework in the spring of 2020.
Amazing. So if somebody is interested in either working with you or wants to sign up for these courses, how might they do that?
Yeah, great question. So probably the easiest and the best way is you can either connect with me right on Instagram. I think you've got that information, Jen. You'll probably provide it to your audience. My handle is dr.shamlakiru, and we've got a link right there where you can get onto our list for when that launch is available, or you can take one of those audits, and that audit will allow us to stay connected with you so that we can let you know once those offers are available to you.
Amazing. So just again, guys, that Dr. Kiru is offering us a free mindset audit and a free communication audit. So we'll have the links to those for you to link over. But I think some of the things to remember, some of the takeaways when you're going through that run and you're starting to feel that you are being a little bit mean to yourself, remain connected, breathe through your body, and replace those thoughts with, I think my new one is going to be, I am strong, and just hear yourself and feel that. And then going through that real talk formula when you want to communicate with confidence. And I think anyone who is in a relationship and is running, sometimes the demands on your time, particularly those that are running longer distances, they're going to need to have those serious conversations with, is this a realistic fit with our family, our relationship? How are we going to navigate that? So the learning to self-regulate, learning to express your wants and needs and desires and boundaries, accepting the outcome, and letting go. So I thank you very much for being on today. We'll have, again, those links over to those things that Dr. Kiru is offering us. So thank you for being on.
Thank you so much. It was my absolute pleasure. And if you do end up connecting with me on Instagram, you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out, send me a DM. I love connecting one-on-one with people.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let the